Okay. The mitzvah of Matzah. Mitzvah Kuf Nun Ches. He shetzivonu lechol matzah b'leil chamisha osa minisan. Yi yeshom keves ha-Pessach o lo yiyeh. Okay. I'd like to preface my remarks. I'm not sure if the question is a question or there is a problem over here, but I found it interesting that the Rambam changes the order of the mitzvah of Sefer and Matzah between Mishnah Torah and Sefer HaMitzvos. In Sefer HaMitzvos, it's Kuf Nun Zayin is the mitzvah of Sefer and Kuf Nun Ches is Matzah. However, when it comes to Mishnah Torah, the Rambam in the Protei Mitzvahs, in Hilchos Chometz Matzah, Zayin Lecho Matzah B'Leilei HaPesach, Ches L'Sapei Tzis Mitzrayim B'Ois HaLayla. And the halachas, he also mesader in Perek Vav is the halachas of mitzvah matzah, and in Perek Zayin is the mitzvah Mitzrayim. So I want to suggest something, and it's a suggestion that not necessarily it's not written in cement. In Sefer HaMitzvos, the mitzvah of Sefer Yisrael, if you recall, spoke about this on Pessach or before Pessach. Ram writes, hey, it is. Ram writes, it's Avinu, the Sapit sees Yisrael, B'leil Chamisha Osa, B'Nisan, B'Tchilas Alayla, Kfit Sachas L'Shon B'Sapit. It's telling a story. B'chol ma she'yeseh b'dibo, b'teo, ha'matzav, b'agdolis ma she'osu bonu, v'avel she'osu lono ha'mitzrim, v'heich nifra lono Hashem mehem, v'hidolo yis'aleh al kol ha'chesed asher gamalanu ha'izim meshubach. So it's telling a story. So a priori, if the mitzvah is just telling a story, so matzah, it's not clear at all as anything to the story. So you can imagine that the mitzvah b'Yisrael precedes matzah, when nothing on matzah, mitzvah sipur. However, in Mishnah Torah, he recants the mitzvah of Sefer Yisrael, and part of it is, he says, to what we know in the Gemara is Rabbi Gamliel, is the Maimon of Rabbi Gamliel. And the Maimon of Rabbi Gamliel is in Ram quotes in Chos Chometz Matzah, Perek Zayin Halacha Hey, Kol mi shelo yomar shloish dvorim elu b'leil chamisha osa lo yotze leichavos v'Pesach, lo yotze leichavos v'Elohein, Pesach Matzah Mora, and Matzah Matzah al Shem sheniglu v'dvorim elu kula nikom hagod. So this is also part. So the Maimon of Rabbi Gamliel becomes part of Haggadah. And if you recall, then I suggested it's part of the din of Chayvod and Lilis Atzmo Kil Yotzim Mitzrayim, Atzmo Yotzim Mitzrayim, and to demonstrate this is the Matzah, we're going out, and it's Hakdoma to the Halil and the rest of the demonstrations. We suggested that bringing the chalosis on the table is like show is also chayav on miyosas atzmoi, and the mora Midivay Sefer might also be part of that. So you have to be aware there's a Mitzvahs Matzah a priori prior to CPC's time, because discussing the Matzah is part of the mitzvah. So it could be because of that he changes the Seder. Whether this is correct or not, I can't tell you. It's just a suggestion, which I usually don't do, but I thought that the question might warrant it. Maybe I'm wrong. Now, he says there's a mitzvah of Matzah b'leil chamisha also, and yiyeh shom keves ha-Pesach or lo yiyeh. And Kapach translates it. He says that he's translating it literally. The literal translation, b'mitzias keves ha-Pesach or shloi b'mitziusa, whether the Pesach is there or not, which might include even Bizman Abayis. And you just want Makah the Kol and Pesach, or you an Orel, or Ben Necha. So the point is that even though there's a mitzvah of Matzah Nechol Min HaPesach, HaMatzah Murim Yochlu, which depends upon the Achilas of Pesach according to the Rambam, but the mitzvah Be'erev Teichel Matzahs has nothing to do with Achilas HaPesach, and that's Yiyeh Shom Keves HaPesach or Lo Yiyeh. So this mitzvah Be'erev Teichel Matzahs is independent. It exists whether there is a Pesach or there's not a Pesach. Yiyeh or Lo Yiyeh. Now, the Rambam also has a Mishnah Torah in Perek Vav Alach Aleph. The Rambam says in Chometz Matzah Vav Aleph, Mitzvah say min HaTorah, lechol matzah b'leil chamisha oso, shene'emar be'erev teichel matzahs, b'chol mokom b'chol zman, v'lo tola achila zo, b'korban haPesach, Elazu mitzvah bifnei atzma. Again, this is recanting what he said before, that the mitzvah of matzah is completely independent of Pesach. And that's the Gemara Avi Psochim, Kuf Chafov and Aleph. Omar Rovo, matzah b'zman hazeh, deraisa, Omar d'Rabbanan, Maishno Moro, Tichsiv ha-matzah murim yochlu, Di'ika Pesach, Yesh Moro, b'zman d'leka Pesach, Leka Moro, Matzah nami hoksiv amatzah murim yochlu. Matzah med dehoda beikro be'erev teichel matzahs. So there's a separate posik, and there's a separate mitzvah be'erev teichel matzahs, and that's a sifra in Parshas Emor. Ein le b'zman shebeis English kayim. So I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, this is not Rabbi Yochanan Perlau. Rabbi Yochanan Perlau flips the whole story. See, I would say that the mitzvah of matzah always existed. The Zman HaPesach, not Zman HaPesach, mitzvah Achilas Matzah. There might be a second thing about Matzah Murim Yochlu or Umatzah Murim Yochlu, but there's a separate mitzvah of Matzah. Rabbi Yochanan Perlau suggests that Be'erev Teichel Matzahs is only when there's no Pesach, which I don't understand how he learns Yiyeh Shom Keves HaPesach Lo Yiyeh. So he writes in the Zbirum of Sadiga in the Esin Aseh Mem Zayin Mem Chesed Mem Tes Ba'al Pizeh Yizbaru Lonu Divrei Rambam Sefer Mitzvos B'chol Devora V'ein Mokom Klal L'chol HaKusha Shiksha Abdover Doniel Abavli Zal the Mashi Hiksha al ma shehevi Rambam mima she'omu v'mechilta tzli eish u'matzah mo'im yochluhu magid shemitzvah Pesach tzli u'matzah u'moro kloima sha'mitzvah hi kibutzam. It's all three together. V'hisig al zeh di'imkei nishma mino gam matzah. V'ay matzah gam l'Rambam mitzvah v'nei atzmo hi. Mazri lo kashamidi. That's what he cuts. The vadai eino chinam because she'oichel Pesach gam hamatzah eino ela tefela. Amazing thing. When during Zman HaPesach, the matzah only tefela. L'Achilas HaPesach. Mishum, the Achilas HaPesach poitrosoi, the adifa me'achilas hamatzah. V'yoika, hakol hakol. V'lechiv hakosem achilas matzah, ela mishum achilas HaPesach chmo moro. V'shapir kos l'ram mitzvah hi kibutza. El mikol mokom le'inyan min ha-mitzvah shapir. Nimne b'matzah b'fnei atzmoi, mishum degoli klo, deberev tercho matzah, l'koi v'choi b'zman hazeh. Af al-gaf kolek Pesach. So you have a strange mitzvah. The only time this mitzvah is only b'zman hazeh. And that's what Rambam means. Ben yesh bo Pesach. Although, I don't understand. Ben yekeves ha-Pesach. I don't understand how it leads the Rambam. Okay? It's an amazing idea that there's a mitzvah which only exists shalom b'zman habayis or when there's no korban Pesach. When you're all on Benech. Next, okay. So this is what he says. I can't say I agree with 100%. But then, and let's understand this. You see, he gained something by this. He gained something. It's a very strange Rambam. In Perek Ches. He says, Ubachrina, after he finished the Suda, Oichel b'bisar Pesach, afilu gizayis, ve'eno toim achov klau. B'zman hazeh oichel matzah. Och gizayis matzah, ve'eno toim achov klum. Kedei sheyeh hafsek sudosoi. V'tam b'sar ha-Pesach, oy ha-matzah b'fiv, she'achilos in hi ha-mitzvah. So it means the b'zman habayis, it's not the mitzvah, matzah. It's only b'zman hazeh. So that might support him. I'm not sure. It's a very strange Rambam. Perek Ches, Chometz Matzah Halacha Tes. Okay. Now, however, l'chayr, what it means, the way you should interpret, is that there are two kiyumim in matzah. Bisman sheyesh korban Pesach. When you eat the korban Pesach, there's a kiyum of be'erev terechol matzahs, and also the kiyum u'matzahs al mo'em yochlu. And the Ram says in Luchos Chometz Matzah, Perek Ches Halacha Vav, V'achar kach korech matzah u'moro ke'echod u'metabel b'chaloises u'mevorech Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam asher k'lishon b'tzasov v'tzivon al achilas matzah muroim b'oichlon v'im ochal matzah b'fnei atzmo u'mor b'fnei atzmo mevorech al zeh b'fnei atzmo al zeh b'fnei atzmo. You have both options. And you make a bracha al achilas matzah muroim. And it's a very strange thing. This kezayis that you eat, you yoitze with it, not only the mitzvah al matzah muroim yochlu, which is part of Pesach, but you also yoitze the mitzvah achilas matzah, and we don't say kilu mitzvah v'alazu azu, because you're having two mitzvahs with the same kezayis. That's very strange. You understand? Rabbi Yochanan Perlo gains a lot by that, but it's very odd. But that is what's going on in the Rambam. V'im ochal Pesach v'lo ochal murerim yotzi de Pesach. He says v'lo ochal murerim yotzi de Pesach, but he's not talking about matzah because matzah you have to eat. Ki ha-mitzvah Pesach k'moi ha-mitzvah matzah. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, reading something. Sorry. That's the Ram. There's no kash. That's the Ram. There's matzah morim yochlu, u'matzah morim yochlu, and there's berev terchel matzahs with the same kazayas. The Ramban does an amazing thing in Chumash. The Ramban agrees there's a mitzvah berev terchel matzahs by Pessach Rishon. Matzah nechal in Pessach is because of berev terchel matzahs. He says, you look at the pasuk, it says by Pesach Sheni, it says al matzah murim yochlu, that the Pesach is nechal al matzah murim because there's no mitzvah matzah on Pesach Sheni. But in Pesach Rishon it says u matzah is al murim yochlu. So Ramban says v'yotze nochoin shenoima ki u matzah is nimshach l'mayla. That v'ochel es habosa v'al hazeh u'matzos v'ochel es habosa u'matzos v'ochel es habosa u'matzos v'chozer v'tzivo im murorim yochlu l'bsar hanizka. But the bosa Pesach has to be nechal also with murorim. V'hinei tzivo b'achilas habosa u'b'achilas hamatzos. V'leitzivo b'achilas hamurerim. Rak oma sheyochlu l'bosa im murerim. Yirmois she'im murerim mitzvah rak lechol habosa imohem. There's no separate mitzvah of moro. It's just to eat it with the bosa. Ubizman she'ein bosa ein murerim mitzvah. V'gam eino ma'akim habosa. V'im ochal Pesach v'lochal murerim yedei Pesach yotza. Ki ha-mitzvah b'Pesach כמו המצווה במצה, כל echos tzavo b'fnei atzah. Is it tzivui a be'er terchel matzos, and is it tzivui f'machilas haPesach, v'ochos avos al hazeh tzliyesh u'matzos amurim yochlu, and that's the separate mitzvah which depends upon Pesach. See, I'm just confused. What's Hillel or what's Kerech exactly? Why you Kerech the matzah? You see, the way he presents in the Chumash, you don't know there's a relationship between the matzah and the Pesach. But in Kerech, you clearly see, and Kerech is also in Pesach Rishon. So I'm very confused exactly what the Ramban's gaining from this. And is there a kiyum of matzah with the Pesach? Is there not in Pesach Rishon? I'm very confused. Now, here comes the tzlach is poshit re'isi ben padesh sheyoshev Moshe Piagvur. What the tzlach is machadish over here is amazing. Comes the tzlach and asks the following question. Once you accept that the matzah of berev terchel matzahs and is a mitzvah of v'yochlas habosa b'al hazeh tzliyesh u'matzah morim yochlu, so is it true, or do we have to assume that the matzahs of the mitzvah berev terchel matzahs is the same or different than the matzah of u'matzah morim yochlu? It could be the same. The question is necessarily the same. So the tzlach suggests, tzlach is in brachos lamed zayin u'beis, v'ol nilafis daiti l'sala kol akushis hein mitam matzah shira, hein mitam aninus, v'hein mitam moishavos, V'hemitam shimul l'shem matzah's mitzvah, hakol b'chada. All the questions. But he has Vatzia Hatzo'o Achas. And I'm skipping over Kshenizke. La'aseh Pessach ilchosoi, v'yizdam in tomei, mishoyev derech l'choika, v'yaseh Pessach sheni, v'yachilenu al matzah mu'orim, im kol protei tnoim ha'tzrichim, b'matzah sholel chag ha'matzahis, tzrichim gam kein, b'matzah boi imoi b'Pessach sheni. That's his question. Kagoin, שלא תהיה מצה שירה, שתהיה נחלת בכל משובויס, באנינוס, ושימו דווקא לשם מצס מצווה, ואם אני, שאין הצריכה, כלום, doesn't need anything. מכל תנועים הללו, ודאי שתהי מצה משומרת מחימוץ. It just has to be watched מחומץ. ובפסח שני עצמוי, אילאו דכסיב ככל קורס הפסח, לא יהיה מצריכים בי כל פרוטי הפסח. ובמצה של פסח שני לא הכסיב ככל קורס המצה. So we have no dinim over here. in פסח שני. ותדע, אצל רב יוסף, דף למד חס או מבייז, עם פסוחים, זה מפורש, טעם של חלוס תדע קיקי נוזר, מקודש שבס יומים, מצס תחלו, בהנה מצה הנחלת שבס יומים, ואותו שייך פסח שני, מצה לשבס יומים, וחייכי לרב יוסף, so the din doesn't exist of they need that the Torah should be a problem. And then he says, Lechamoni is part of Shivas Yom Techel of Matzahs, so it's nothing to do with Pesach Sheni. And the losh of Oinein is not applicable because it's also for Shivas Yomim. V'otva Matzah, Shim Pesach Sheni, B'tezva V'iyah, Oinelov, and Lechem Oinelov, V'om Harbe, and Oinein. There's Haggadah in Pesach Sheni, there's no Haggadah. So the Matzah, the push of the Matzah. And that's how he answers Rashi's Kasha. The Kasha in Rashi Menachos, Lochem B'kulam Yotza, Rashi says, you take the Menachos, you Yotze Matzah. So he says, it's not the Matzah Pesach Rishon, it's the Matzah Pesach Sheni. Then he says it's too big of a Chiddush, and there are problems, whatever it is, and he falls off the Chiddush, he falls off. Okay, next. It's certainly clear to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that if you're allowed to eat moro on Yom Habo Osa, and for Pesach Sheni, because the Mitzvah Achilas Pesach, maybe not the Mitzvah Moro, so even though there's an Easter called Matzah Pesach Yilbar, also Beis Chomav, I can imagine that you can eat the Matzah also Erev Pesach. Okay, maybe. Now, next. Now, this pasuk is a pasuk be'erev Teichel Matzos, and the Ram continues be'erev Teichel Matzos akosov kovoi chayv, and that's the Mechavbia Omu. He quotes the Mechilta, the Rabbi Yishmael. Be'erev Teichel Matzos hakosov kovoi chayv. Kfais boy b'psochim she'achilas matzah b'laylo rishon chayva mekan ve'erech rishos. So that the Gemara learns after Shiva Shem Teichel Matzos, Shiva Shisha, and it's only be'erev Teichel Matzos. So this pasuk of Shiva Yom Teichel Matzos, the Ram does not quote it all. He only quotes be'erev Teichel Matzos. And he quotes it in Perek Vav of Hilchos Matzos, El Chometz Matzah. and the dina be'erev teichel matzahs. There's no hint in the Rambam at all that there's a kiyum of Achilas Matzah Shai Mei Pessach. Because he doesn't even quote Shivas Yom Tov Matzahs. So l'chera, the Rambam should interpret that Shivas Yom Tov Matzahs is that you can't eat chometz. Matzah means non-chometz, and there's no kiyum. What I want to present to you, everyone talks about the goyim. I want to present you Rav Sadi goyim, a different goyim. Okay, Rav Sadi goyim learns that the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah is not from Be'erev Teichel Matzahs, but is from Shivas Yom Teichel Matzahs. Yeah, let me see. Yeah. He says like this: Ushenoichal b'shivas hayomim matzah v'lo chometz. Kefi she'omar matzos ye'ochel eis shivas hayomim. So he doesn't quote be'erev teichel matzahs, and he says the mitzvah is shivas yomim. The Gemara says chayiv, so I assume that he learns that the rest of the thing, the rest of Pessach, if you eat it, is a kiyum, and the Pessach is a chayiv. But the mitzvah is shivas yom teichel matzahs. Be'erev teichel matzahs is not the mitzvah. It's just that you have to have the matzah of shivas yomim on the first night, certainly. Then, in the Chasimus HaSefer, he writes like this: the cave and shagam. You have to keep in mind, Rav Sadi Goin is chilik on the whole yesod of Shiur Shishi, and he says that if it's an Aseh and a lois Aseh, but Dova Echad, you only count it once. Shabbos is counted once, even though there's an Aseh and lois Aseh, it's counted once, because it's basically B'Dova Echad. V'kivan shigam tzivuy v'lechol matzah ein ha'isa al achilas chometz. He's postulating that the mitzvah of achilas matzah, the isa, is not just not to eat chometz. You're supposed to eat matzah, even if you don't violate chometz. Ki efsher sheyochal shneim kechad. You eat matzah and chometz in the same bite. V'eini sur lagabe chometz sivuy v'achilas matzah. It's not the mirror image. Ki hu yochol lechol dvorim acherim milvadom, which are not matzah, but are not chometz. Hechshavti oisem shtei mitzvahs. It's not the mirror image. There's a mitzvah of shivas yom teichel matzahs, or matzah yochel shivas yomim, and an isa of chometz. Two separate things. And here you've seen upside the goyim foolish, and even more than the goyim. The goyim with shivas yom, I think the mitzvah be'erev teichel matzahs, but shivas yom there's also kiyum. Upside the goyim says the mitzvah is doch be'erev teichel matzahs. It's not be'erev teichel matzahs, but it's shivas yomim. Matzahs ye'ochel. Matzahs ye'ochel shivas yomim. Therefore, certainly kiyum. Okay. Now, just a lighter note, and a lighter note or not, this interesting observation. And I'll make it. The Rambam Nevuchim he talks about the Mitzvas Matzah, and he says the following. In Moreh Nevuchah Chelek Gimel, Perek Mem Gimel. Ushnei HaMoadim Ho'ela, is going to Sukkot and the Pessach. I'm going to focus on Pessach. Sukkot and Pessach. Malam din deos umidos. They teach us correct thought patterns, what you beliefs or approaches to life, and also midos. Omnom amidos hu shi'eh odom zeiche yemei haro'ah b'mei hatova. You learn from Matzah. You should remember the ro'ah b'mei hatova. Because the matzah is indicative of lechamoni. And then he says, ba'avur sheyarbe lahodos laHashem. So ki'ilu that it's mechayiv a halil, and this sounds like the Rashi in Psochim Lamed Vov. If you remember Rashi in Psochim Lamed Vov, says lechem she'olim v'om harbe she'goyim of zahal v'om agoda. Okay, so it seems to say that there's a chiyuv of halal per se. That's anyway b'teres hagoda. But if you have the matzah and you see the oni that we had in Mitzrayim and you see where we are now, you say more halal. She'olim v'om Zeiche yemei horo'ah b'mei hatova ba'avur sheyarbe lahodos laHashem. So it's yarbe. It's not the mechayiv of halil, but there's more halil. You don't have to say it on the matzah, but the matzah is coming by understanding the matzah. You'll say a greater halil because you understand the only they were in Mitzrayim. And then he says that it's another aspect to it. He says also midas. He says that it's midas ushiyilmoid midas anova v'shiflus. Yoichal od matzah umor b'Pessach lisko mashi'irolonu. So it's very strange. Here, the Chayr is not explaining matzah, but he's explaining why we eat matzah more with Pesach. And that's what he says, Lisko Mashi'ir Olonu. And to remember, to have, even though Pesach, we're with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shechina is here, the Hashkocha is here, but you should remember also where we were, the Anivus, that where we came from, they were absolutely, on the south of being exterminated. Okay. And he quotes the guys by Psochim Achilas Matzah B'layla Rishon Chayva Mikan V'Elech Rishus, and I would assume that Rishus is nothing. Then he ends. He doesn't have here, but probably should be added that Noshim Achayiv in this mitzvah. And the Ram himself says it very clearly in the Siyum in Minyan HaMitzvos. He says, Ve'elu Ashishim Mitzvos heim lefi aseda asher sidalnu oisanu yonenu zeh va'kuf nun hey is one of them. Hine kva izboy lecho ki me'elu ashishim mitzvah chechis meish mehen sheish ve'arboim mitzvos shanoshim chayovim bohen gam kein ve'arba esrei mitzvos mehen she'en anoshim chayovim bohen. And Matzah is one of the mitzvahs noshim chayovim bohen. And he has it in Avodah Zorah in Perek Yud Beis Halacha Gimel. V'chol mitzvahs Aseh shehi mizman lizman ve'eno tedir noshim chapatuos chutz mikiddush hayoyim v'achilas matzah b'leil Pessach v'achilas Pessach shchitosah v'akil v'simcha noshim chayovim. And then also in Hilchos Chametz Matzah Perek Vav Halacha Yud Hakol chayovim v'achilas matzah afilu noshim v'avodim. So that's very clear. And this is the mitzvah matzah. It's a separate mitzvah minyan mitzvahs, and we discuss the issue of how it interacts in Matzah, how it interacts with Pesach, and is the matzah of Pesach Rishon of Be'erev Terchel Matzahs is the same matzah of Pesach Sheni. Now, next mitzvah. HaMitzvah Hatesha v'chamishim umeya. Hi shtitzivonu lishpois mimolocha. Here, so, l'cheira, okay, so the mitzvah, lishma is mevlocha, you have to cease and desist, but I guess there's something you're supposed to do. Lishma is mevlocha, biyoim rishon shel Pessach, v'amrei yis'aleh, biyoim rishon mikol kodesh. So Ram's done a magical act. If I would have asked you what the mitzvah of Shvisa Molocha and Yontif, you would have said the Gemara says Yontif is an Aseh and it says Shabbosa, and the mitzvah says Shabbosa. But the Ram is faced with a problem which it's not so simple to forget, to dismiss. The problem is the following. The Pessach says Shabboson by Sukkot, by Rosh Hashanah, by Yom Kippur, but by the first day of Pesach and the last day of Pesach and Shavuos, it doesn't say Shabboson. It only says Mikol Kodesh. So the Rambam, who has this new idea that each Yontif is a separate mitzvah, minyan mitzvahs, Pesach, Yom Rishon of Pesach, Yom Shvi of Pesach, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Rishon of Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeres are 7 separate mitzvahs in minyan mitzvahs. And since you have to have a pasuk in Torah Shabbat, you have to have a pasuk. So it can't be Shabboson. So the Ram says Mikol Kodesh. But looking at Mikol Kodesh, you're amazed. How is this? What is this? So here, the Ram is aware of the problem. And the Rambam has V'da Shezu Hakdoma, and probably it's better Kapach translation. V'da Hakdoma Zeh. You should know this Hakdoma. What's the Hakdoma? Akdama here, again, we mentioned this a lot, and we spoke about it in Shvisa and other places. We mentioned also in Mitzvah Vov, other places also, in the, I don't know if we did it together, but and it's also in the second half of the appendum to Shir. Mikdama is a postulate. It's a Judeo-Arabic word used in medieval philosophy for postulate. So he says, you have to know this postulate before you can begin to understand the mitzvahs. Now he's going to tell you what the postulate is. A postulate. Vihi, kol ma she'omar boy, beperushoi, who kol ma she'omar boy, mikol kodesh, any yontif where the Torah says mikol kodesh, bo beperushoi, there's a pirush mukubal from Moshe Rabbeinu, kacheu. Okay, so postulate number one, you see, the same problem is basically Shabbos, and we'll talk about this as we proceed tonight or next week. Shabbos is a day of rest. Mikol Kodesh, calling, whatever you want to translate it, it's a noun. Okay? Weren't we taught by the Rambam in Shir Shmini that mitzvahs and minyan have to be a tzivui, a command in language? And there's no tzivui, there's no command over here. So the Ram says that even though we look at the pasuk of Mikol Kodesh, we don't see a command. The Pirush Mekubal for Moshe is there is a command, and that's the first postulate. Bo beperusha kachehu. There's a tzivui here, and then he says, what's kachehu? Kachehu, you sanctify the day, but that not doing malacha. V'in kachehu shosase boy malacha. Elo shemiyucha b'achilo. Acha sheyochel chol nefesh. B'yom harishon mikol kodesh. B'yom harishon mikol kodesh. Acha sheyochel chol nefesh. Hu levada yochel lechem. Elo ma shemiyucha b'achilo. That you're allowed to do. Kmo shebir akos. Go shebir akos.
Okay.
Ukfa. Okay. Being kachi. Now let's try to understand this. The Hanocha, you see, he just does. Let me just add another thing. He does B'da shezo akdomo. There's another word that we have to stress here. Vihi kol ma she'omar bo mikol kodesh. Every single case that the Torah says mikol kodesh, kol ma she'omar bo mikol kodesh, bo beperusha kachehu. V'in kachehu shelei sase bo malacha. There are two things going on. There's every single case is that, and it's a tzivui, and it's a mitzvah. How do we know it's a mitzvah? Ukva kodem lanu lashon omrom hai shabbos nasehu kloima ki Kol Yoim She'oma Hashem Shabbosan Hu Ki'ilu Oma Shvois Shabbosan or Tishbois. See, it does the same thing by Shabbosan. It's not a noun. But there's a tzivoy of Shvois and Tishbois. V'elu kulam hein tzivuyim b'Shvisa. Every place where it says Shabbosan, and every place where it says Mikol Kodesh. Now, there's a problem over here. The Rambam offhand is telling us something which is a priori not, at least let's be nice, that it's not, it's unclear of its truth. Because the Sefer says in Parshas Emo, Vayom Rishon Mikol Kodesh. It's in Parsha Yud Beis Perek Yud Daled Halacha Daled. Vayom Rishon Mikol Kodesh Katsheu. Or Vayom Shmini Mikol Kodesh Katsheu. B'ma ato mekatsheo, b'machol u'b'mishteh, u'b'ksus nekiah. So the Sefer says the opposite, that katsheu is not a tzivui about malacha. It is a tzivui, but it's b'machol u'b'mishteh, u'b'ksus nekiah. So l'cheira, this is a very big problem. So there are those that suggest that the pshat in the Sefer is when it's Mikol Kodesh together with Shabbosan, that you have Shabbosan anyway telling you an Aseh of Shvisa. So what does the Torah add also Mikol Kodesh? That's Katsheu b'machol b'mishto b'ksus nekiah. But where there's no Shabbosan and you need a tzivui on malacha, then Katsheu is a tzivui on malacha. And the Sefer happens to be talking about Sukkos. And on Sukkos, it says, besides Mikol Kodesh, it says Shabbosan. So we can learn Mikol Kodesh for other things, and L'machal Mishta, and Ksus Nekiah, and Shabbosan for Malacha. But by Pessach, Yom Rishon, Yom Shvi, and Shavuos, where it only says Mikol Kodesh, there the Mikol Kodesh is Malacha. Then, if this is true, you can interpret the Machlokes of Elazar, Rabbi Akiva, and Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Eliezer interprets Shabbosan is not Lishbois Mamaloch. So in Mela, he darshins Mikol Kodesh Katsheu Me'asiyas Malacha. Because Shabbosan is not telling you about Malacha. So you interpret Katsheu. Look at Rosh Hashanah Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Tichsiv Shabbosan Zichron Trua Mikol Kodesh. Shabbosan Ze Kedush Zayim. Zichron Elu Zichronos. Trua Elu Shofros. Mikol Kodesh Katsheu B'asiyas Malacha. Omer Rabbi Akiva B'bnei Ma Lo Noima Shabbosan Shvois. Sheboy Pessach HaKosel Tchila. Ela Shabbosan Katsheu B'asiyas Malacha. Zichroin, Elu Zichroinos. Trua, Elu Shofros. Mikol Kodesh, Zu Kedushas Hayoim. The day should be holy. So again, you see from this that you interpret Katsheu B'asiyas Malacha only if you have no pasuk telling you about Malacha. You interpret Katsheu for Machal Mishta or other things of Tushayim only if you learn the Isa Malacha B'Shabbosan. But if you don't learn the Isa Malacha B'Shabbosan, Katsheu is Asiyas Malacha. This will be all very nice. It sounds very nice. This is okay in the Gemara. This is okay in the Sefer. I'm not sure what the problem is exactly, if this is a problem. But if you open up the Mechilta of Shumi Yochai, which the Rambam uses very often in Sefer HaMitzvos, L'cheira yesh pircha l'dover. Because in Pesach there's no Shabboson, and the Mechilta there is talking about Pesach, because that's the Mechilta, the only yontif there in Parshas Bo. We're talking about Pesach, and it goes like this. And there's only Mikol Kodesh and no Shabboson. So do you have another option according to this of Mikol Kodesh of Achila or Shisia? And Ksusi, you don't have it because there's no Shabboson. You have to learn Isa Malocha, Shvisa Malocha. So it says like this. B'yom Rishon Mikol Kodesh B'ma ato mikacheu Kacheu b'macho, kacheu b'mishta, kacheu b'tzus nekiya. So this approach is very nice in Mishnah Torah, the Rosh Hashanah, Talmud Bavli. But if you learn that the Rambam has to deal with the Mechilta of Shumi Yochai, which he seems to deal with very often, and he also sees the Kol Pirush Makubal. It says some Mechilta also is like that. So it's very odd that it should say Katseu Asis and not Katseu B'machel Mishnah and Asis Malach. This is a kasha they have. Don't know the answer, but I think it's a kasha which you could ask. Now, the Ram quotes before the Pessach Ubayom Rishon Mikol Kodesh. So l'cheira it's in Emo and in Pinchas, and l'cheira he's not referring to the Pessach in Bo because that Pessach says Ubayom Rishon Mikol Kodesh. If the Ram is medactic very much, but I would assume that he's also referring to that Pessach, even though he doesn't put a vav there. Because the Ram says over here, you remember, v'inin kacheu shalase boy melocha ela ma shemiyucha b'achilo kmo shebia akosuv, that it says mikol kodesh and it says acha sheyochel l'chol nefesh, and the same pasuk. Listen to the pasuk. Ubayom Rishon Mikol Kodesh in Bo, Vayom Shvi Mikol Kodesh Yeh Lochem Kol Malocha Lo Yeh Aseh Bohem Ach Asher Yeh Aseh L'chol Nefesh Hu Levado Yeh Aseh Lochem. The pasuk is mavaya that this Mikol Kodesh which includes also Leisasa Kol Malocha Mikol Kodesh, so the Rambam is Mikol Kodesh, Yeh Lochem, Kol Malocha Lo Yaseh Bohem, is Acha Sheyochel L'chol Nefesh, and it means Ochel Nefesh is mutter. There's is a problem in just plain reading the text over here. Remember, he learns the kacheu is shaloi sasa b'malocha. Ela ma shemiyucha b'achila, kmo shebe'akos. The question is, and then he introduces Shabboson. Why does he introduce Shabboson over here? Hi Shabboson Asehu. Kloima, kol yoim she'oma Hashem boi Shabboson hu, ki ilu oma Shvois oy Tishbois. But this is very odd, to say the least. The Rambam here is talking about Yom Rishon shel Pessach, right? Yom Rishon, there's no Shabboson. Doesn't say Shabboson, always says Mikol Kodesh. So what does he want? Ha Shabboson Aseh hu Kloima. Ki kol yoim she'oma Hashem boi Shabboson hu, ki lo oma Shvois Tishbois. Very odd. If I would have been the Rambam, I would have said Shabboson, this discussion Shabboson, when I get to Sukkot or Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, where it says Shabboson. And then I quote, this is a Raya. Why is he quoting this in Mikol Kodesh? You notice something else. He's quoting this as part of the postulate. V'da hakdom azay. This is the postulate. So what does he want here? Ve'elu kulam hem tzivuyim b'shvisa, correct? So V'elu kulam, what it mean? V'elu kulam heim tzivuyim b'shvisa. So I can imagine elu kulam is Mikol Kodesh and Shabboson. And he learns, since it says stam, that Yontif, Hai Shabboson Asehu, and he says, Kloima, ki kol yoim, shoma Hashem boi Shabboson, hu ki ilu oma shvois oy tishbois, v'elu kulam hein tzivuyim b'shvisa. So you don't know, is he referring before? But he just says, kol yoim, shoma boi Hashem Shabboson. V'shapsois, then he says something else, which I just want to start. V'shapsos Hashem nikra'u yemei hamo'adim kulam. This, he's using that all the Yom Tov called Shabbos Hashem is maybe we're not learning out. Maybe we're not learning out for Mikol Kodesh. And there's a pasuk which we'll see, I'll explain in Mitzvah next week, that he says, V'shapsos Hashem nikul yemei avodim kulam. So once it says Shabbos Hashem by all the Moadim, because the Rebbeinu Shalom calls all the Moadim Shabbos Hashem, so Mela, there is Shabboson, and Mela, all the Yom Tovim have a mitzvah. And the amazing thing is, which you have to pick up, because it's one amazing thing on another, and they become separate mitzvahs and minyan, even though it's one word. And it's separate mitzvah of Yontif, of Pessach Rishon, Pessach, Rishon shel Pessach, Shvisa shel Pessach, Atzeres, and all the other Yom Tov. The other ones, you have Shabboson, but it says Shabbos Hashem. Loitza loima Yomim Tovim. All the Yom Tovim are separate mitzvahs. Understand why they're separate mitzvahs, how they're separate mitzvahs, and how the Rambam pulls this off.